It's my feeling that nothing short of an impenetrable cage will keep everyone out of the park after hours. The current fence is damn ugly. The decorative fence, such as the one at Marna, would provide a boundary for the park for honest citizens while providing safety for children who might bolt into the street after a ball. The entrances through the fence should be properly posted with the hours of operation and notification that the park is guarded by security, and we're supposed to be having cameras. I understand there's some money in the budget. And currently our security budget for all three parks is $6,200 a year according to the budget proposal, which adds up to about $17 a day, or 19 cents for every man, woman, and child for a year, which I think is a little lacking. We could, I think, increase that budget without killing the Measure Z money. And that's what I have to say about that.
First of all, greetings. Gary Nordquist, City Manager, Bridget Moore, Councilwoman, and Marcia Swan, Mayor. I'm Robert Garza. And I've been a resident of Wildomar for 23 years. And we moved to Wildomar for a reason. We moved to Wildomar because it was wide open, it's country, and our kids, you know, we grew up in a city that was surrounded by real violence, real drugs, and real gangs, which is our primary reason for moving to Wildomar. With that said, when we came to Wildomar, to us it was paradise. Our kids did fantastic. I have 2 sons, 1 daughter. Today, both married. My daughter married. They have children, 6 grandchildren, and we love Wildomar because it is so wide open and so free for them to play. When we lived in Santa Ana, we lived in a fenced yard. Our kids could not go outside this yard because it was dangerous. You know, there was a gang element, there was heroin, cocaine, marijuana, I mean, real violence and real ugliness. So they were not allowed to go outside that fence. We came to Wildomar and they had a blast. They loved playing out in the fields, the creeks, the ponds, all these fantastic places for them to be free. Windsong Valley is very dear to me because when I first saw Windsong Valley, I loved it. And I said, I want to live there. And we bought a house there 13 years ago. And that park has been wide open. Our kids played there. My son, adult son, played basketball there with the neighborhood youth. So our grandkids are playing there now. And it's fantastic. We want it open. I mean, for them. It's not like a huge city, gigantic park where it really needs like that protection fence. It's a neighborhood park. It's just different. Windsong Valley, to us, was our dream, and we want to continue to see it to be beautiful, open, wide open fence. And this yellow light's on, and I talk too much. Sorry. But thank you for letting me speak.
Hello, my name is Joseph Morabito, and I've lived in Wildomar since 2001, specifically Windsong Valley. And the park is about a 4 to 5 minute walk from my house, and I walk down there with my dogs several times a week. I've had several conversations with my friend Monty Goddard about the fence. I'm for the fence coming down, and I don't want there to be a replacement fence, even because obviously the one that's there is an eyesore. And we know that he's pro keep the fence, so the conversations get interesting, but they're friendly. He's a good neighbor. But I do have empathy for those that live near the park. And when my wife and I selected Windsong Valley as the neighborhood we wanted to purchase a home in, we specifically told the realtor, don't show us anything near the freeway. Don't show us anything near the school. Don't show us anything on a busy street. And though the park is closed, we didn't want to see anything there either. Because we know those areas come with their own quirky deals. At the freeway, I mean, it sounds like a river's running by it. I don't know how people have a conversation in the backyard there in the summer. At the school, you have the bells going off. You have the morning drop off, the afternoon pickup. So it's like an on again, off again madhouse. Obviously on a busy street, nobody's going to be teaching their kids to ride a bike in front of their house or playing kickball out there. And if you're at the park, I mean, that must be like the school, except for worse, because instead of it ending it in the afternoon, it kind of starts in the afternoon and goes into the evening. And whereas the schools, you get a break since the weekends are usually off, it's the weekends. And that doesn't even count whether there's illegal activity at 2 in the morning. If that's going on, if there's concerns with illegal activity, it sounds like we need to direct the police to keep an eye on it. That's why we're paying them. But my empathy, again, doesn't go so far as to say we should put up a fence that's up there 24 hours a day. That fence is out, it would be there to keep out illegal activity. Well, the laws don't stop illegal activity, fences don't stop illegal activity. On Cervera, there's this fence, I don't know if, because it's like a sort of a decorative fence, the vinyl fence. And it gets kicked in, and then there's also behind it a chain link. And it gets opened so they can ride the motorcycles or just hike back there, I don't know. So though there are 2 fences there, it just gets kicked in. So even if we get a new fence, it's going to need constant repair and upkeep just to keep it looking right. But then picture that we're all paying the price because of some illegal activity that we should address in a different way than the fence. So that we're all paying for that fence. So the family pulls up to the park. And instead of 10 feet away, they're on the grass. Now, you know, the mom and the dad have to hold the young kids' hands, go 50 feet this way or 50 feet down the sidewalk to go into the gates instead of just go to the park. Some places like maybe a Chicago or something, maybe they need fences. I haven't seen that here. So anyway, I'm against the fence. Though I have empathy for those that live in such places where there's these things you have to put up with. So anyway, thank you for listening.
Can I speak in tonight?
I'm listening. You can only do 9.
And 9's max?
9's
Okay.
max.
Well, I wasn't going to do this, but I want to. Because I've heard so much about, hey, this is just some weird guy that lives on the corner of Prairie and Gerson that's causing all this big stink. I had problems when that park was open. My neighbors right around me did. I talked to them about it. But I was shocked right before Measure Z came up for vote to read a letter in the Press Enterprise from a neighbor. And I've read it to you guys on more than one occasion. But for those who haven't heard it, I want to read it. I understand the desire to support Measure Z and have family-friendly parks in Wildomar. The problem is the inability to police our parks. We live across the street from one of the parks that closed. When we moved in, we thought it would be great to have that transformed into a park. Several years later, that came to fruition. Then the problem started. There was drug use, littering, vandalism to our property, a break into our garage, loud music, fights, and more. The police don't have the personnel to respond in a timely way. Since the park closed, there has been peace. I know we hate looking at a fenced-off park and dead grass, but it beats the alternative. That got me motivated. And a year ago, I started attending all the city meetings to discuss this. For this evening, now to get to my part. Mayor Swanson, Councilman Moore, City Manager. My name is Monty Goddard and I live in Wildomar. I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen. First, nothing I say tonight is meant to disparage anyone. Certainly not our outstanding Wildomar law enforcement personnel. I spoke to the residents of 22 of the 23 homes closest to Windsong Park. 21 of the 22 want it fenced and secured after hours. For the most part, these are the folks who live through the after hours problems emanating from the unfenced and for all practical purposes, unpoliced park. The last 4-year period was open. Wildomar did not have the police force to properly patrol the park and when it was last open. Police response to after-hours issues were extremely hit or miss. Since then, our police manning has been cut by 1/3. This resulted in doubling and tripling of already lengthy average police response times to priority 3 and priority 4 calls. Those are the calls the park generates. With only one deputy on duty in the entire city for much of the overnight hours, no one expects the parks will be policed. In fact, the upcoming reopening of the city's 3 parks will generate even more police calls for service, which undoubtedly will lengthen the police response times throughout the city. That affects public safety for all the citizens of Wildomar. Recently, a blogger equated living next, and a good friend, by the way, equated living next to Windsong Park with living under the flight path of an airport. While empathy may be felt for that set of homeowners, just like you would, I got a problem with glasses, sorry about that. While empathy may be felt for both sets of homeowners, just like you would not stop airlines from taking off and landing, you would not fence a park, especially since in both cases, the homeowners chose to buy homes there. Most airports cease late night and early morning operations. When there is no fence, Windsong Park does not. My neighbors and I knew when we decided to purchase our homes that living next to a park had drawbacks. Analogous to living in an airport flight path and listening to airplanes taking off and landing, we signed up for the traffic, the parking, and the noise the park would produce during its, and I got this in bold print and underlined, authorized hours of operation. When we purchased our homes near the park, my neighbors and I expected our elected representatives to ensure the park was policed like parks in other communities we are familiar with. This was not the case. The park created so many after-hours problems that many of those who eagerly awaited its last opening now prefer to look at an ugly fence and dead grass. After 8+ years with a fence, followed by 4 years without a fence, and now going on 4 years with a fence, my neighbors, my wife, and I know fences do work. They do not eliminate the problem, but they certainly reduce it. If that was not true, we wouldn't be here this evening. The decision before you tonight is whether aesthetics or public safety should be the basis for whether Windsong Park should remain fenced and secured at night. As elected representatives of all the citizens of Wildomar, you and your fellow council members have a responsibility, more importantly, a fundamental duty to provide for the safety and security of all Wildomar residents. You have 3 effective solutions to this issue before you tonight. The Chevrolet is to upgrade the salvage heritage Regency Dog Park fence currently installed at the front of Windsong Park and secure the gates after hours. The Buick is to replace the current security fence with a more attractive security fence and the security gate and secure the gate after hours. The Cadillac is to remove the security fence altogether and provide the police force necessary to properly police the park. Just like a car, any of the aforementioned solutions could be accessorized with cameras, private security patrols, and or a neighborhood watch. These accessories, though, are limited in effectiveness by the timeliness of the law enforcement response they can initiate. To fulfill your duty to all the citizens you represent, given the very real limitations of the city's general fund, I expect you will go with the Chevrolet or Buick. I will work with you to someday acquire the Cadillac solution we all want. And based on our past experience, my neighbors, my wife, and I expected would exist when we decided to purchase our homes adjacent to the park. I sincerely do thank you for your time and your service to the citizens of Wildomar. And I didn't hear my email read off when we were doing the tally.
Sheila Urlab, okay. Usually people can't say it. I've had the handwriting issue before too. All right, since this seems to be the style, I'm Sheila Urlab. I've lived in the Valley since 1985. I've lived in Wildomar since 1992. There's my bona fides, okay? I'm a homeowner, I love the town. I do not live in Windsong. Let's be honest, I live out kind of rural, and I have challenges in that area. I have certainly gatherings, dirt bike riders, and all of my own issues. I seldom make a police call. I guess those would be priority 3 or 4, so I'm guessing the response time would be low on those. When I drive through a neighborhood and I see bars on the house windows, it sends a message about the kind of community I'm in. When I look at the park and I see a big ugly fence and it's locked up, it sends a message to me about the kind of community we live in. I understand from Gary's numbers, it seems to me, I'd love to hear what the numbers were back when, without the fence, for police calls. I just think we don't live in that horrible of a community. When we're talking priority 3 or 4 calls, I am not surprised that the response time is low. Motion, and I'm just saying because they're busy with real stuff. I'm wondering, can we not do with a decorative fence? I do like a decorative fence. I don't see anything wrong with that. What's wrong with motion sensor lighting? It's amazing what happens, and I've known this from my own business experience. When you have a property and you have dark corners, people break in, people do a lot of bad things. But when you have lights that pop on and they're no longer in the shadows, they don't want to hang out there. I also would ask, have the people in that area who live around the park, and I've talked with Monty too, nice man, so no disrespect, but I think maybe they've gotten used to having nobody using the park and that feeling that you get that this is yours. And I think they take it for granted. I mean, I think common sense tells us Marna O'Brien is a huge park. We've had problems there. We don't seem to get the calls in because maybe the neighbors are not watching it quite as closely. Honestly, when I see a dirt bike rider going up the road near my house, I could call. They're breaking the law. You know, they're off-roading and whatever. But I don't. Because quite honestly, I don't watch that any more than I watch my neighbors. So I am saying, take down the fence. Don't lock up the park. Let's not send a message that Wildomar is this scary, creepy community.
Next speaker is John.
For the record, John also emailed.
And for the record, Jane and I bought this house when our daughter was about to turn 20, when Jane was pregnant with her, in our dream home in Windsong Valley, our first home. We moved from Vancouver, Canada. So we were attracted by public open spaces as well. And our daughter was brought up in that park. Last week we heard of the idea of leaving a temporary closure fence up at Windsong Park as a permanent liability. I didn't know it was $500 a month with the other ones. I totally am against this idea, including the costs of having to maintain, lock, and unlock the unsightly fence. Even if you put in a nicer fence, we have the costs. Dawn and dusk, every day of the year. Fences do not make better citizens. A greater sense of community makes better citizens. The funding should be going to after-hour programs. They should be going to youth programs. They should be going to movies in the park, not locking the park. Fences do not create a better sense of community. Windsong Park was designed as an open public park space, and there are so many reasons this is a bad idea. I don't have time. I literally couldn't even begin. I'm not the only one who's against the fence. This is a redesign of the park. It's a fundamental redesign of an open space park. It wasn't designed to be fenced. Many speakers tonight are also grossly opposed to this bad idea. In the last couple of days, we were able to ask 112 local adult residents what they thought. I'd like to give you 110 names and addresses and signatures of people in Windsong Valley who are grossly opposed to the idea of a fence. That's 110 out of 112 people asked. We strongly oppose closing in this open space. Please keep it open. There are other solutions. Security lane is a good one. But locking it up and closing this little space is not a good idea. It's much too small of a park, and I would personally feel insecure if I were having a picnic or walking my dog in that park and some of the dogs in the neighborhood running loose came through the gate and none of us could get out. It's a liability. I didn't know it was 500 a month. Please don't do it. 110 out of 112. Thank you.
I don't have a prepared statement, but I do have some comments on some of the issues that we're trying to address. As far as I've heard comments about there haven't been that many calls to the police, and if we had a tally, I think we'd see otherwise. I personally made several calls, tens of calls. You know, it's too many to count. And I live, my bedroom is overseeing the park, and I don't have a problem with that park. I voted for that park to be open. I love that park. I like walking my family through that park. I just don't want it, I don't want people in there at night. Now, I've seen private security that's gone through there. They'll drive, they have, the ones that have been there, I didn't even know who this was. They come by, they put their spotlight out, they shine it around, and they go. There's no commitment to keeping people out of that park. Now, I don't see any way of keeping people out without police. Now, the fence is a nice, if we can get a better looking fence, that's great, or police, but just to have it wide open, I mean, I'm losing sleep, and I mean, it's like nightly. As far as the porta potties, they were removed from the park for some reason. I think it's because they were dumped over. Repeated. Yeah, or set on fire.
The parks were
So-
closed.
What's that?
The parks were closed.
They were being dumped over when the park was open.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that that's kind of illustrates the issues that we got to deal with, and the vandalism that's been there. It's not good. The response time is weak, as we know. I think we can all agree on that. So I'm in favor of some sort of controls, whether it be police or a fence, but not wide open. Thank you.
John Sakala? Sakala.
Hi, my name is John Sakala. I've been in the Valley and also been a resident in Wildomar before Windsong Valley was even there. So I know a lot about the Valley. I've done many projects with the Seventh-day Adventist Church as far as redevelopment in the Valley and making it a better place and better places for people to go to get, education on what to be a do-gooder and rather than be doing something they shouldn't be doing. I've experienced everything in the neighborhood there as far as crime, mentioning one of the top level things as a licensed security officer since 1994. I've experienced arson there. I've experienced many things that occur in and around that surrounding park and inside the park also. I've also had to use very powerful and purchase, extremely large lights, spotlights to shine it over there and haze these people out because they don't want to leave. And by the time the response time, I also agree, is so long. I don't need my wife out there. She's a cousin of a rock star. What is she going to be out there toting a light for some kids that are out there? You know what I mean? She's got better things to do, and so do I. And it keeps us up. And it's like I'm behind those trees. I'm well over 500 feet, and it's still a pariah. And I say, whatever you have to do, if it's aesthetics, keep the fence. Trust me. You'll be glad you did, because it's just going to open a Pandora's box for nothing but problems. And if anybody should know, it should be me. I've been there the longest. Taking nothing against all these wonderful people here, but in true fact and form and character, I'm delineating to you that please keep the fence, save us all that heartache, because we don't want to go through it. We really don't, honestly. And I ask all of you to reconsider. And I thank you so much for the engineers that came out and put the fence by the riverbed adjacent to my property to protect children from falling into the riverbed. I really appreciate everybody listening to us. It's been great. It's been fabulous. Can we do this again by just simply opening the gates up? That's all we have to do. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Mitchell, and I live across from the park on Prairie Road. And the thing about the fence, well, number one is the speed in which people drive up and down Prairie Road. It's a long straightaway. Kids drive up and down that street extremely fast, and my concern is when the park reopens, and when it was open, were the children that were at the park that sometimes, because the amount of people over there maybe wouldn't be as supervised as well as you'd want, you know. And always worrying about a child darting out into the street between cars, and because of how fast everybody drives up and down that street, that we could have a potential tragedy. And I've seen several close calls. I've had to yell at parents because their kids basically were making their way down the street, and the parents weren't aware of it because the children were very young, and there's big family events going on, and people just lose track of a child, you know. And my worry is that one day something tragic is going to happen when we've got a safeguard in place that could potentially eliminate that. And, you know, I would hate personally to ever have to talk to a parent about their child, something happening, when we've got fences in place that could potentially eliminate that from happening. So they're not attractive. In a perfect world, you know, the fences wouldn't have to be there. But I think unless we put speed bumps on that street to slow the kids down, that this is probably the best option we have to prevent anything bad happening to a child. So that's all I have to say.
Well, I just want to address actually a couple things before we start discussing. Kenny Mays brought up increasing the security budget. I actually like that. Monty brought up Neighborhood Watch, and there actually is a Neighborhood Watch meeting tonight in Windsong, so definitely the neighbors around the park can get involved in that. Sheila mentioned motion sensor lighting. I like that idea, especially in the back, or something I'm sure we can work on. And then you mentioned about Marna watching. They do. The residents, I am called all the time about Marna. if the water's on too long, or yeah, anything. I am called constantly about Marna, so those neighbors do watch Marna just as much as what's on.
But it's not good.
So, very hard decision. I think both sides had valid points.
Very, very valid. And coming here tonight after the emails we've gotten all week, I kind of thought I had my mind made up. And I don't know that I do. And I don't know that you and I can make the decision alone. I would be for a nicer fence if it's kept fenced. I don't like the fence that's there. We've talked about, with Gary, maybe security cameras, security people driving by, somebody to lock the gate and unlock the gate. That all does come at a price. More concerned I was with children running out into the street because you have to park right there in front. So, I mean, all of you have got great points. And I think this is something that's going to need to go before the council. I don't even know that I could make a recommendation tonight which way to go. I think we need to maybe have a couple plans figured out by staff. You know, plan A, plan B, plan C, whatever, Cadillac, Buick, I don't remember the other one. But, and what they'll cost, because all of that comes with a cost. And I agree, I want our parks money to be spent on activities and things to do for the kids. That's why they're there, and the adults. I mean, there could be some adult programs there in the evening hours with daylight savings time. And I wouldn't want, you know, kids hanging out there at night, and I don't know how you keep them out of any place. You know, they fence the schools and they still get in there. So, you know, I don't know if that's the real answer to keep the bad guy out. The bad guy seems to know how to climb a fence.
Well, I think with the security guard that we're going to have the security going to each park every night, all through the night, that's definitely going to hamper their fun. And if they're there, and the security guard comes too. So that's a question. So the security guard arrives at the park and he sees 5 teenagers. He will then ask them to leave. Do we know what his parameters are, and what did they do last time?
I believe last time they drove past the parks and they were to touch the park, as they say. Each one of the 3 parks 3 times a night. They drive through, shine the light, they see the activity, go out and see what the activity is. If there's any issues, they never call police.
Okay. So
Are we gonna continue to do that, fence or no fence?
That's what the that's what the $500 was. that we
Covers
had
all
last
3
time.
parks.
That covered all 3 parks last time. It included locking up of Heritage because it's a flood control channel. So we, for liability purposes, we need to have the ability to close that. They would walk Heritage every night and lock it up and reopen it in the morning. And they'd also go to Marna and Windsong 3 times during the night and check out the park activities.
yeah, I thought they had the wand and they had to go by through the different
Yeah,
stations.
they have
Yeah.
an activity loop that they had to
And then they have to provide the report of what happened the night before.
Correct, yes, yes. So that activity, that cost was, it was under $500 in 2011. So it's probably a few dollars more now for that. If we, the thought, the $6,000 that you saw in the budget was this type of activity for security. So we go with the security cameras, the lights, activated by motion. Great ideas. Should we get back our monies from the state, then we will have additional police services available. It's a big if. We'll find out this summer. But that would provide quicker responses, and then we would have more than one officer per night. So there's a couple solutions, and maybe in phases that we, similar to what Monty was saying about the different types of cars with accessories, and maybe that's the option, that we look at something that's very secure right now. Get these measures in place with the security and the lights, and then we get additional police services on track. We have quicker response time. That comes on in the summer. We can look at leaving the gates open, see what kind of issues that causes. We get that activity. There's a minimal disruption or calls based on just leaving the gates open at night. Then we can take the fences down and see how that works. So there could be a number of phases. I've lived personally had a park that was directly behind me, a neighborhood park like this, and it comes with pros and cons. It's a beautiful view, but at times it gets used, and there's activities, there's birthday parties, there are kids playing there all the time. So it's we can come back to council with some of these suggestions. Be glad to work with community members with their recommendations and formulate that into a staff report for council's consideration. And proceed in that manner.
That's what I'd like to see, is a couple choices and the costs of a couple choices, and maybe baby steps, like you said, leave the gates open at some point and see what that does, and then maybe take the fence down. That park certainly was never meant to be fenced, but I have always worried about somebody running into that street, because it does have traffic.
Yeah,
And it is hard to keep track of little ones every now and then if the ball heads out into the street, so.
down south, the other cities down south, there's a large soccer complex, and they have just a split rail fence. There was soccer balls going into the street all the time. And I said, that's not safe. So, this is the passive part though.
What was interesting and kind of funny is when we lost our $28, the reason the judge gave was because the people who lived closer to the park should be paying more money because they got more benefit.
Yeah.
That was the judge's words, I swear. I said, he's never talked to someone who lived next door to a park, but those were his words.
It was, yeah. I hear the residents that live there. I hear you. I don't live next to a park. I live in the track by Regency Heritage. But I have to say, I tend to agree that the fence should come down. That it was not meant to have a fence there, and I think we could do We could try it. We could take the fence down. But you have the security guard. Like I said, he'll be going through the parks. He'll be there to kick anyone out, take care of the issue. And then we'll know from the police, first of all, we'll know from the report that comes in every single morning from the security guard. And then we're going to know from the police reports if the activity is picked up. And then we can go there and decide again. And at that point, if we are going to put the fence back up, we put a fence back up that's more decorative and that people like.
So we're in agreement to bring it to council with a couple of ideas and costs, or you want to just take the fence down, make the recommendation to take the fence down?
Well, we still have to recommend it to council anyway.
You have to do something, right? Either up, down, or they decide.
Well, even if we recommended one way or the other, the council still can
Yes.
change it, modify it, or totally not take the recommendations at all. We could do it, yeah.
Well, the benefit of tonight is we heard a lot of really good ideas
Yes,
and
really.
suggestions. So now we go ahead and formulate a strategy or several strategies to present to council at the next meeting in February for their review and discussion of this. I think that's.
So in the back of the park where the teenagers are hanging out, is there poles or is there already infrastructure that we can put in motion sensor lighting?
Back, that gazebo that's back there, there is electricity to it.
Okay,
So if we come off of that line, there
okay.
should be the ability to.
So that's pretty easy to.
Yeah, I would think, you know,
Some of those lights now work off from
Solar.
solar.
They charge all day and you walk under them at night and they come on. That might be something to look at too.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, so.
They put the solar panels and we run it for free.
That's right. One with the barn owl house.
Can we recognize Ken Hearing as a suggestion or?
Just a quick thing. Some of those new security lights also
Come
have.
up front,
Oh,
Ken, please.
not loud enough.
No, we need to record you.
Yeah.
Some of those new security lights also have cameras on them with speakers. They use them in construction sites to warn you that you are being photographed. It might be something to look at.
We
But if
need
we let them
a,
know-
we
Construction
need a
companies
really
around
tall,
this
skinny
town, somebody
pole.
can tell you what they cost.
Well, if we let them know they're there, they might, take them out.
Well, they're mounted pretty high up on a pole, and there's really no getting to them. And you start shaking the
Something to
pole,
look at.
and the cops get called anyway, so.
Good idea.
So back to the security then, because you had mentioned it was 3 times a night. Can we see how much it costs for 5 times a night, or what the options are for security?
Sure. Yeah, we can, and make sure that's an active patrol and not just a drive-by with
Right.
shining a
Because I
light.
know before they had to do the wand at different areas, so Paula knew.
So we knew they were
Yeah,
there and where
right.
they were.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had to get out of the car.
We can do that.
Well, I want to thank everyone who's come out here tonight to give us their input. It's real important for us to hear both sides. Bonnie?
Since Ken got one more and I didn't use all of my 9 minutes,
Oh, I was gonna ask the same thing.
I didn't.
Well,
I
this
don't know,
is-
I'm not, you don't have to time me. I just want to make sure that people realize that for things like security patrol and all that kind of stuff, any of that kind of stuff to work, all that can do is initiate the call to the police. If we have one policeman, it ain't gonna help whether Monty calls them or the security guy calls them or the camera calls them or whatever calls them.
And we'll just
If
have
we
them
only
call
have one
Bridget.
deputy- If we only have one deputy, it's just, the end result is the same. I can tell you one thing from personal experience. There was one time not long after we became a city when we had a little more robust police force. We actually had the 2 deputies per shift plus the extra guy. One night, after several calls, I had 2 deputies show up, one down at one end of the park and one down by my house. The one down by my house got out of his car and stood by my fence. The deputy at the other end was down at the old entrance to the park. He came down as soon as the people, and they hang in the playground equipment too, because it's not lit. So as soon as they saw him, they booked it down towards my house. And when they got down there, the deputy stood out with his flashlight put in his eyes. They took those kids and they put them back over underneath that back cabana. The police officer actually drove his car out there. And for the next couple hours, there was a steady stream of, I'll call them adults, coming to pick up their children out of that park. And for about the next month, there were no problems in that park. If we had some policing, we could control that park.
Okay, no, I was gonna.
This is a little less
All right, I'm the last
less
one, I guess.
formal than city council, so, last one.
All right, just real quick, and I'm a big fan of this. We have neighbors to the south of us, Murrieta, Temecula, much higher crime rate than us. And I know this because I know a DA in the area. And it seems to me common sense to reach out to them, to Lake Elsinore, to Paris, which is really challenged, and I understand the issue that they have more police, but let's talk about what they do with their fences that are right surrounded by houses. You go up from my property, you go up Lost Road, takes you into Canyon Hills, that new area that, well, not new anymore, and there's a park there, not fenced, surrounded by homes, pretty isolated. I'd love to hear what kind of problems and how many times they have to call the police. Again, not to minimize anybody, let's reach out and look. Really, we have to have all this in our community? That's sad.
Those kids live in Windsong, I'm sure. Every one of them.
But we've been told by some that they are coming from other cities because they know we don't have cops.
No.
So I understand if they're coming from Windsong, because I found out from my daughter, who's now almost 23, that at a period in her time when she was 17, and she was visiting friends, they would go over there around 10 o'clock at night. Honestly, I get it. Chase them out. But really, we're talking about security measures that I didn't see in parks when I visited New York City. Sorry.
Yeah, Central Park is pretty open.
Can I ask one more question? And this is really quick.
Okay.
I don't even have to get up there. My question is this. I thought that the city contract for the police coverage gives us the ability to, if we don't have a cop in Wildomar, then they'll send the sheriff. So it's
If
not.
it's an emergency, yeah.
Okay, so if somebody feels there's an emergency, their safety is being breached because there's somebody in the park,
Yeah,
a sheriff will come. It's not like there's only 2 officers in Wildomar, one of them has to be here. It means that any sheriff's deputy can be sent, right?
When there's an emergency, yes.
Well, emergencies
They're prioritized. Yeah.
So which they should come right away.
But if somebody calls and says, "Oh my God, there's a vandal in the park right next to me, and I fear for my safety, and they're next to my, my dog's out here, whatever," that could be considered
None of this
emergency.
is getting recorded. Yep. Okay, so we will move on. I think our agreement is to bring this into council.
No, we're done.
We're done. We're done.